Welcome back to Gaffer Salon. Once again, today is Grip Salon. And again, I got to say, this kind of rigging, this is the domain of the grip department. And on a feature film, episodic TV show, union job, this is the domain of the grips. Gaffers, electrics would have absolutely nothing to do with it. It's not our business or our job. However, on non-union jobs that I do and in other parts of the world, it sometimes does fall into our domain. And frequently I might be working as the key grip to my business partner or buddy who's gaffing, and we have my truck out and my gear and so forth. And so I am often tasked with having to build a Menace Arm rig. This one is strictly for demonstration purposes. I would never build a 6-foot Menace Arm rig. This is just so we can talk a little bit about safety and how to think about, building a Menace Arm safely. And I'm just putting a disclaimer out. These are some things I've learned over the years from working under and with key grips. I've tried to modify my approach in different ways, always with safety as being my top priority. You need to do your own research and your own consultation with key grips and other people to understand the best way to do it for your situation. That said, I want to say straight off, I have seen accidents happen with Menace Arm rigs. I've seen them fall over for a variety of different reasons. I'll try to make a couple points today about things that I've seen go south. I'm talking mainly about simple single pipe Menace Arm rigs, generally between 10 and 16 feet. I typically do them in a sit-down multi-camera interview where we have to get a key light, upstage side, far side key, etc. So we're generally working with 12, 14-foot Menace Arm rigs. Usually it's not a terribly heavy light, like a light mat, or maybe it's a small Fresnel or whatever. We're not putting heavy lights on these Menace Arm rigs. And so I have on my truck a variety of Schedule 40 aluminum 1.25" stock speed rail. I don't know if it's called speed rail in other parts of the world, but here, aluminum pipe basically, right? You could do it out of steel pipe, which adds a lot of weight. So generally all my rigs are off some amount of speed rail. I carry 12-foot, 10-foot, 8-foot, 4-foot, 6-foot. I carry 6 of each, so I have quite a bit of speed rail on my truck, and I can make different length pipe. And here in New York, often you can't get 12-foot inside because it won't fit in an elevator. So sometimes we're bringing in 2 6 or an 8 and a 4 or an 8 and a 6, and we're using a speed rail joiner, and we're making a longer pipe. So the first thing that I'm always thinking about, of course, is safety. So it's always critical that you know the load capacity of any stand that you're working with. Like, what is the total weight? This is a Matthews medium roller. Maybe you're using an American Grip 3-riser combi. Maybe you're using a Matthews mini Vader. Or if you know you're going to have a heavier and a bigger light, maybe you're going to an Avenger or some larger crank stand. I'm talking mainly about rigging off of smaller stands, but the principles are, all the same basically. So I want to be concerned about how good is this stand? Where did the stand come from? Is this a stand I own? Am I in a job where I've rented the stand? So if I've rented a stand, if this stand appears and I know I'm going to have to build my Menace Arm and I'm going to be sending it up 8 feet, and that's the height it's going to be working at, I want to be damn sure this lock is good, that this brake in this stand is going to hold all my weight, right? 200 pounds. I want to make sure it's going to hold. That's a major concern. The quality, make sure the stand is in good shape. There's nothing that I'm seeing. There's no screws that are missing. There's, that basic kind of maintenance stuff. When it's not your equipment, you want to be sure this is not going to fail, because you know how often it is. This light may be booming out directly over talent, and an accident could kill somebody. We all know that. This is one of the most dangerous things we do, and we have to rig this out over talent's head. We try to avoid it when possible. We'll try to move the Menace Arm rig so it can come at a more acute angle perhaps, and avoid being directly over their head. But we all know there's times where you just can't do that, and it has to play over talent's head. And in those situations, you have to be absolutely the most vigilant with safety protocols and redundancy in your system. So even though I might have checked and put my full weight on this particular brake, I'll usually, because I'm paranoid and I'm concerned that nothing happens to anybody on my set under a Menace Arm that I've rigged, I will usually come in and put a Cardellini clamp on this stand. Even though I've just tested and I trust this brake, this is just redundancy. This is just an extra thing that makes me sleep better at night. I'll crank this down with my wrench. If I want to get fancy, I'll put a little tennis ball on the end, and now I know I have redundancy here. So quality of the stand, the weight capacity of the stand, checking the brakes, condition, all that stuff. So generally I'm using a 3-piece Menace Arm set. This one is made by Modern Studio. Now I've altered the design on my personal sets on my truck, which I'll talk about in a sec. But you're basically triangulating. If this was a longer pipe, you'd be helping to take the bow out of the pipe and give it more rigidity. So you're always triangulating up to here and over with a ratchet. Now you could just go with this hook and go in there, but I like to use carabiners, just so nothing falls. Like when I'm loosing it, I'm de-rigging it. It's just my personal preference. I don't think it's necessarily safer, but it's just the way I found that I like to do it. So what the difference is between what Modern does, and I think Matthews might be similar to this one. They've over the years, Modern's tweaked their design on these. I'm not sure what they're currently shipping, but it used to come with these two parts. So you had a junior one, right? So you could put this on the purchase end and put a junior light, and this would be on your back end of the pipe, or vice versa, and you could have a baby pin, and you could rig it above or below. And you had D-rings, right? So the principle would be you would have one at each end, you would triangulate through here. So I've replaced it, instead of having that there or this there, and there's a reason I did this, and it's because of the way I like to rig. Now, what happens is with this, the original design, you couldn't pass these through. Modern made them so they could pass through. So you could slide this along the pipe. The problem is you're triangulating from this point. So this is you're gonna have to lock this in. And for me, what happens is the DP last minute, oh, can we move that key a little more frontal? And so you need to slide the key. So I need to be able to slide my light mounting points on the fly quickly. So I decided that I would not use these, because what would happen is I'd have this at the end, then we'd end up having to jump into a Cardellini. Then I had this point here. And just in case there was a failure and this came down, you do not want this hitting somebody on the top of your head. I just decided these weren't so useful for my way of rigging. So I had Modern make me a sleeve on both sides. This one has a double D-ring because we're going up with the ratchet and we have to go down. This one just has a single one going up. And I've got the set screw here where we tighten down our 3/16, and we can triangulate. So this works great for me because then I can add a Cardellini. Now I give up being able to get a Cardellini all the way to the end of the pipe, but I'm fine with that. And the reason I did that was because in New York City, in a multi-camera interview, I know my stand frequently gets boxed in, between camera and sound and everything else. I can't just take the stand and move it 2 feet and be able to, get my key light more frontal when the DP asks me to. I might be boxed in. So that's why I like to be able to slide. Often I'm rigging 2 key lights. If I have a woman, I might have a main key light and a more rappy frontal light. So again, this is going to be a much longer boom arm, right? But that's the general principle. So one thing I want to point out, so just to talk a little bit about one other point of trying to be as safe as possible. So this is a standard, I guess this is the Avenger combi head into my 2K combi stand, right? So one of the problems when you're putting in your Menace Arm rig, if you put it into the combi head, it is not, the weight is not now directly over the center of the stand. It is offset by a couple of inches, right? So that is not ideal. So American Grip came up with the solution for that, and that is called their center combi head. So this is a combi head that goes and puts the weight directly over the center of the stand. So anytime I'm rigging a Menace Arm, I use my center combi heads. I keep the weight perfectly aligned. So that's really important for me and adds just another level of load safety, especially if you're going up higher than you might normally. If you're up 10 feet, say, that starts to get exponentially more problematic. So that's what I try to do. And I think, generally speaking, we all know that, you want to keep and balance this weight, right? We've got a fulcrum established here. Once there's a point of failure somewhere to cause this to come crashing down, ideally, this would be perfectly balanced and it would just float down, not crash down. So we can do something about that. We can stick a sandbag and counterweight it here. So best I can, keeping in mind my total load capacity of the stand. So weights plus the pipe plus the rigging plus counterweight, that has to be under the capacity of the stand. So I will try to get that fulcrum, I will try to get that weight as equalized as I can. You can't always get it perfect, but if you can get it close, if there's a point of failure, if a ratchet strap should break, if something fails, this will not come crashing down and kill somebody. So those sorts of safety balance concerns are always in my head when I'm rigging. Once I get my lights loaded on here and I'm up at altitude, then I could add my counterweight. My sandbag, typically I'd put another one back here, either add another carabiner, I could even attach it to this one. Again, I know the load limits of everything I'm using. If you forget, usually it's printed right on your ratchet strap, 766 load pound max capacity, right? These are, everything has a load rating. So I'm always cognizant when I'm building, looking at all the gear I'm using, seeing if I'm seeing rips or tears or frays. Okay, time to replace that, take it out of service, throw it away, or use it in the shop for incidental use. So one other thing, I've seen some people like to use these rather than the slings. I prefer the slings. I don't know where these come from sometimes. In fact, the theater is a lot more concerned. If you go to, for example, Chicago Flyhouse has got an interesting YouTube channel where they literally test the load strength, the braking strength, and it depends who the manufacturer is. If you go, for example, I don't know if this is Matthews, but Matthews makes these safety chains. There's no specs on Matthews' page what the load capacity of these are. So I know with my slings what my load capacity is. And also too, if you start, after years of use, you get little kinks in the wire, that is going to affect your braking strength. You're going to have a slightly compromised safety. So sometimes people will put these around the base of the stand and connect their ratchet strap to them. I don't tend to do that just because I prefer the slings, the climbing slings. But if you use these, make sure wherever you get them from, you know the spec, you know the capacity, the load bearing weight capacity of these. And so I've got this triangulated. Now I have to do something between the back and the base of the stand. So I've seen issues come up in that respect. For example, one time many years ago, I saw someone had rigged off a steel 3-riser combi stand, and they had put wheels on this to be able to move it around. And fortunately, we were not shooting. The grips were moving it from point A to point B. But somebody had forgot to lock down the Rocky Mountain leg. So as they were moving it and they were panning it, the weight suddenly shifted to a point where the Rocky leg just gave way and the whole stand went. The other thing that I've seen happen is here I've got a Matthews stand. So going down to the base of the stand, in this case we're using a Matthews medium roller as an example. So we know when we open the stand, we lock down this, but if somebody forgets to lock this and you put your ratchet strap around here, I've seen this pull up because of the great amount of weight and torque on it, and I've seen a stand almost go over. So I'll move the sandbag so you can see, but so I use a sling that goes all the way around the base, which will never move. This cannot move. And that's where I'll put my ratchet into. So I know for sure, even if there's a point of failure here, this will not come up because I'm really grabbing down further below. Last thing we're going to do here, so I now need some kind of a ratchet between this point that's going to hold my weight, right, and the bottom of the stand. So as I pointed out, I've got this in a position that there's no way this can fail or pull up on me because I'm down below the point of this. And then I'm going to take my ratchet. So now I'm going to take this and then eventually I will coil this up once I'm at height. Now I'm showing this all with a short speed rail. I would never do a Menace Arm rig with the 6-foot piece. And I'm showing it right low to the ground. This would always go higher, but just so it's all in shot and we can talk about it. So I've got this neat. I've got my weight out over my leg. I've got 3 bags on it now. Now we would go back and I would add more bags relative to how much weight I have on it. I get something in the center. Generally, I'm somewhere between 4 and 5 bags. And so this would be going out, like I said, 12, 14 feet. I'd have some lights at the end. I'd be up at a higher altitude. I'd have my safeties on here. I have my center combi grip head. And what I like to do, now if this, wherever possible, I try to position my Menace Arm rig so I don't have to be directly over the head of talent. So if I have 2 people sitting at a table, I might be able to use a slightly longer Menace Arm, come a little further back and around so I'm not directly over the head of talent. But there are some situations you just can't do that and you have to go over the head of talent. And anytime I'm in that situation, and just in general, again, I try to have redundancy. So rather than just have one ratchet strap, I will mount a second ratchet strap. Sometimes I'll come up here, or I'll do a separate one, not use this. I'll try to have points of redundancy and also down on the bottom. So I basically will duplicate this ratchet strap, ratchet a little bit lighter, just as a safety, just as a point of protection in the event of some component failure, particularly if I'm out over the head of talent. Now, once I get my lights on, I'm very likely to come back and put a counterweight bag here. Either I'll put a second carabiner, hang the bag from that. Usually a 25-pounder will be about enough, you know, knowing the weight capacity of the stand. That's kind of what I like to do. So those are some of the you know, redundancies. You don't really need a redundancy up here, but I try to, wherever possible, double safety. And lastly, what I'll do in location is I'll look up at the ceiling and see if I've got a rig point or a safety point up there. Once I'm at height, once the Menace Arm's in position and we've kind of signed off on it, if there's somewhere I can get a piece of sash, I can get up there and loop and lightly put a safety from the ceiling to this, I will always do that. Now, a lot of locations, there's nothing up there, there's nowhere to rig, which is another reason to be as safe as possible in all your redundancy and your safety concerns. You know, I always check, once everything's rigged, I check the stability of the stand, I make sure somebody didn't come along and loosen something. You know, sometimes we're on sets with younger folks and somebody makes a mistake or they go up to adjust something and they leave something loose. So before we roll, before talent sits in on a Menace Arm that's over talent, I will be extra vigilant and double check everything, make sure everything is absolutely 100% safe. So that's kind of what I've discovered about Menace Arms. Obviously you can go to a Larger crank stand, you go to larger. There are other types of Menace arms, and there's other types of boom arms to rig. This is really talking about the standard 3-piece Menace arm set designed principally for speed rail. It can work with steel pipe as well. This is typically the kind of one I do all the time, and these are some of the things that I like to be concerned about when I'm building my Menace Arm rig. So hopefully that's some kind of help.